Exactly. So, hello everyone. Thanks for joining us. A few new names I don't recognize on the list there. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, we're going to give it a minute before we formally start, just to make sure that everyone has had time to sit down in front of laptops and get themselves a glass of water. Did it rain where you are, Stephanie, today? Because obviously today's St. Swithin's Day, which is they say if it rains today, we'll have a bad summer, and if it doesn't, we'll have a great summer. But
I had a great day today. It was very sunny, but now that you've said it, I've noticed there's some clouds that have been kind of hanging around. So I'm hoping that they just hold off till tomorrow, and then we'll be fine. Good summer, good summer. That's what I'm hoping for. What about you?
No, it 100% rained down here in Kerry. Yeah, pissed out the heavens. It's been really, really warm, like sweating even here talking. But it's really humid. But it rained. Yeah.
Oh. So that means that we're going to have great weather up here in Dublin, and you guys are pretty much guaranteed 364 days of rain in Kerry.
Yeah.
Because you got to have at least one day of sunshine. That's the odds, right? If you're in Ireland, it's minimum of 1 day of sunshine, maximum 4. That's it.
Yeah, normally the first day of the leaving cert. But,
oh my God! Yes, always.
So we might start away there, because it's been a minute or so and no one's joined from the waiting room. So folks, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to see like Thomas there, like good lads who come on a lot, and Alan Duff and a few new names there as well. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, my name's Luke. I'm the general manager of the Celtic Whisky Bar and Irish Whisky Experience down in Killarney. Oh, someone just joined there. We're the world's largest collection of Irish whisky. This is a picture of the bar behind me, about 1,500 different whiskies. And we have a huge selection of craft beers, a lovely cocktail menu, and we're home to the Irish Whisky Experience. We educate all and sundry about whiskies and how to drink whiskies and the history of Irish whisky. Although for any of you who are looking to get down this neck of the woods this summer, we've suspended the Irish Whisky Experience until at least Christmas, because at the moment we haven't been open anyway since last year with COVID, and it's just too difficult. So once we can open the restaurant for indoor dining, we will, but we're going to hold off for a while for the Irish Whisky Experience. So, but you can still do whiskey flights and stuff in the bar. Absolutely delighted to be joined tonight by Stephanie from Liberties. Stephanie, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself and maybe introduce our first whiskey?
Hello. So my name is Stephanie Shen. I am the global whiskey human at Dublin Liberties Distillery, and I've been a bartender for about 10 years. I was focused on cocktails, and I entered a lot of competitions. I basically just like sniffing things and tasting things, and obviously with the boom of Irish whiskey, working in a bar for however many years, everything I was using was imported. So when the kind of boom of Irish whiskey started to happen, it also brought like a craft boom. So it was exciting to be able to utilize Irish products like Irish tonic, Irish bitters, but I've always had a soft spot for whiskey. And so basically the guys in Dublin Liberties were like, hey, do you like whiskey? I was like, yes, I do. They're like, do you like cocktails? Yes, I do. They're like, do you like talking? I was like, oh my God. yes, I do. They were like, you're hired. That was it. Honestly, that was my interview. So so I'm here today to talk to you guys about some whiskey. So we are going to go through a couple of different bottles. So you should have 4 samples in front of you today. So we have the Dubliner Smoked Stout, then we have the Liberties Copper Alley, the Murder Lane, and the Keeper's Coin. So this is the order that we're going to be drinking in. And obviously, I've been to plenty of whiskey tastings, and I'm actually going to talk for another 25 minutes before the first sip, and then we'll jam all of them together at the end in the last 10 minutes. Is that cool with everyone? No?
That sounds top notch.
All right, okay. So I think that what we're going to do is we're going to have the smoked stout first. And then we're going to kind of taste it first, and then I'll tell you the story behind it, because I feel like it's much easier to listen to me ramble on when you've got a drink in your hand. I just want to say before we get started, does everybody have your samples in your glasser, and does everybody have extra water? These are important for your whiskey tastings, for that full 360 experience. And if that's the case, then let's go. I do have a PowerPoint presentation, because I mean, obviously that's what they tell me to bring. So if you would like, I will share it, and if not, then I can just do a lot of hand waving and a lot of talking at the screen. So it's up to you guys. Would you prefer to have the presentation?
I think PowerPoint sounds good. I've just enabled your screen sharing there if you want to try and bring it up. That's exciting.
Oh my God. It's a PowerPoint. It's really not that exciting.
Well, it's it's all how you sell it. The other thing I always forget to say this in the introductions, but I didn't say, we want to hear people's comments the whole way through. So please keep them coming in the chat, both not just questions about what we're discussing, but also tasting notes. You want to hear what people think about the whiskey. So sorry for not saying that. Anyway, back to yourself, Stephanie.
Oh yes. Yeah, so as you can tell, I'm someone who's very, very enthusiastic. I'm very excitable. But yes, I absolutely sometimes, like do need to be interrupted to be like, hey, yes, Steph, we need to talk about this beautiful whiskey. So please share all of your tasting notes. And I'm just going to throw tasting notes at you. I mean, that's what whiskey tastings are all about. I have tasting notes, you have tasting notes. It's really interesting how different tasting notes are for different people, though, because it kind of depends on how tired you are, what the temperature is in the room, what did you have for dinner, have you chewed gum? Anyway, first drink we're going to be tasting is, as I said, the Dubliner Smoked Stout. So, take your sample. I'm sure that you guys are all pretty comfortable with whiskey, but obviously, take your time nosing it, look at it, smell it, sniff it, take it out to dinner, get to know it. What I would say is that this is a delicious liquid. It is at 40% ABV, but even though it's at 40% ABV, I still do recommend to add a couple of drops of room temperature water after you've tasted it, because it does open up a lot more. So, Solancha. It just makes me happy. Okay, so what we have here is our Dubliner Irish whiskey, and this is one of the beer cask series. So this one was launched very recently at the beginning of July. And as I said, it's the smoked stout. So that's our beautiful bottle. Here's one in somewhat 3D. We actually very recently changed our branding. So originally we would have had that kind of arch Dubliner logo, and we're slowly transitioning into this bright, punchy stencil. So yeah, this is our shiny new branding. So I'll talk you through what the liquid is. Oh yes, so the Beer Cask series is a limited edition collaboration with like-minded craft brewers aging beer in whiskey casks and whiskey in beer casks. So the process, I feel like if I have shared my screen, sorry, this is a tech question for Luke. If I have shared my screen, can you guys see the little panel on the side? Can you see the whole screen?
They should be able to see your thing if they've set the gallery. It's up, you can in your own view, I can see you, but I think people at home might have to set standard speaker gallery in the in their own view settings.
I just wanted to make sure everyone could see the presentation.
But everyone can, once you set the screen sharing, everyone can see perfect. the PowerPoint takes over on everyone's screen as far as I'm aware, and it's just awesome. the boxes in the side that you can modify then.
Awesome. Okay, so the process: brew is beered and fermented. The brewery receives empty whiskey casks. The beer rests in those casks, and then they take it out and they bottle it or can it or keg it, and then they give us back those casks. We age our whiskey in it, and ta-da! The birth of a beautiful new whiskey is born. So, what is the whiskey? So our core whiskey in our range is the Dubliner bourbon cask. So it is essentially like Ronseal. It is exactly what it says on the tin even. It's a blended Irish whiskey. It's a blend of grain and malt. It is very grain heavy. It is aged in ex-bourbon barrels. It has an ABV of 40% and it's from Dublin.
Where's it? And is the spirit from you guys as well, or?
Oh, so as is the case with all distilleries, we're still waiting. It's that ticking time bomb, where we're like, we are making liquid. We have been since 2019. So we're just kind of like, we're like horses raring to go, So
sorry, I wasn't trying to be awkward. I thought you'd been distilling a bit longer than that in my head. So my apologies.
No,
had young Liberties whiskey.
Some of the new kids on the block. But I have sniffed and tasted some of the stuff that we've been making, and I can tell you, even like from my completely unbiased opinion, when I smelled it and tasted it, I was like, oh my. So it's pretty good liquid that is coming out from the team there. So I'm very enthusiastic for when we do switch over to our own liquid, because I think it's going to be really, really good. But yeah, so this is our core whiskey. So this is the whiskey where we would have taken the whiskey out and sent these whiskey barrels over to Rascals, and they would have aged their beer in it. So the beer is this one. So this one they called the Big Smoke Stout. So the Big Smoke is a very Irish term. It's generally used to refer to a city, usually Dublin. So you would say if you were kind of living outside of Dublin, you'd be like, oh, we're going up to the Big Smoke. And you have to put in the H. It doesn't count if you don't put in the schmoke. I don't know, they must have misspelled it on the can. But yeah, so essentially Rascals are a craft brewery that are based in Inchicore in Dublin. They make phenomenal beers. Their whole ethos is to be kind of like fun and funky. They like to play around with lots of different flavors. And so for this one, what they did was they had a rich and smoky imperial stout finished in ex-Dubliner casks. So you can see the breakdown of the malts that they used, the hops that they used, and the yeast that they used. For anyone who is a beer geek and would like to know more about that beer. Unfortunately, due to the logistics of how long it takes whiskey to age versus how long it takes a beer to age, I'm not sure if you can buy this in Dublin anymore. So I feel a little bit mean showing you this delicious beer and being like, this is delicious, but you can't have it. What you can have, though, is delicious whiskey. And so, yeah, so this is the beer that was used to add a finish to the cask. And this is the finish that we've added to the whiskey that you're currently drinking. And so that has added a lot of those darker notes that you expect. For me, it actually adds a lot of creaminess. So at 40%, it is chill filtered, but I do feel like it has pretty good mouthfeel. There's a lot of kind of coffee. There's a lot of dark chocolate, as you would expect. There's also a lot of digestive biscuits, very sweet, kind of like warm, freshly baked cookies. Yeah, so it's a pretty nice one. The finish is a little bit smoky, but it's not overwhelming. The smoke that's there, I feel like it's very much in the background. It's almost like it's just popping its head in to say hello. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about this one.
It's almost got like a smoked meat flavor to the nose.
Yeah, I feel like
barbecue.
It has like, there's almost like butter. You know, like I don't know if I love when there's butter in whiskey. It's like one of my favorite flavors. It like
we know all
instantly
about butter
makes
down
me
in
so
Kerry.
alert. Oh yes, well of course you make the best butter in the world. Who am I talking to?
We've got Sekru in the chat here, says lots of apricot on the nose, and that's a really interesting one. It's not one I would have personally got immediately, but now that he says it,
yeah,
you can kind of pick it out. Yeah, there's definitely a sweetness to it. All right, anyway.
Yeah, it's like pretty sweet on the nose, and the sweetness carries through on the palate as well. I think it's pretty balanced on the palate because initially I find that I get a lot of kind of sweet malty biscuity notes, and a lot of that kind of like, you know, the from the bourbon cask, a lot of the vanilla and caramel that you expect. But there is also the dark chocolate, the coffee. There's a little bit of spice on the end as well, and it kind of, that I feel like that tempers the sweetness of it. So for me, it's quite balanced on the palate. Finish isn't the longest, but it's pretty nice. What I really, really like about this whiskey is that when you add a tiny bit of water, I don't know if anyone has picked up any candy floss, but I have so much candy floss on the nose. And then when you add water, it's kind of like drinking a candy floss cane. I don't know, candy floss cloud? A candy floss cloud.
Drinking candy floss, yeah. No, I mean, I'll try it with some water, see if I can get. I'm gonna have a confession. I think most beer finished whiskies I've tasted are really bad, but this is, I find, very, very drinkable. And I'm talking about, I'm generalizing here.
Are you a beer drinker though?
I love beer. Yeah, big craft beer.
Okay. So I'll tell you guys a little secret. I don't really like beer. I feel like beer is just like sad whiskey. I'm like, there's one extra step that you have to do. So there's very few beers in my life that I've been like, this is amazing. But I love beer finished whiskeys. So
well, I know it's really hard to get it right in terms of the beer staying fresh in the wood.
Yeah.
You've very, very quick time that you need to transport, empty the casks and get the whiskey in. So it's a very difficult process. I know we've done Shane Kelly from Dot Brew. I don't know if you know Dot Brew. They were based in Dublin. They've just moved outside of Dublin. But they're one of my favorite breweries, and they've done some exclusives with us at Celtic where we've taken whiskey casks the other way around. We've done like single casks with Napoleon, and we've taken the Burgundy cask from it, and the whiskey's gone and set in the shop, and then he's aged beer in it, and they've worked out great. But it is it's a real skill to get it right.
Yeah.
As I'm sure you do know, I'm just I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, like, the thing is that, like, for something like this, you know, pairing with Rascals, I mean, like, I'm kind of assuming that everyone knows they've gotten so big in the past few years for a very good reason. I'm not really a massive beer drinker. However, I do really appreciate what they do. What they do is they try to be innovative within the world of beer. So, you know, they have a lot of experience with kind of playing around with different flavors. And actually, we have another collaboration with the same guys, which is due to be released potentially next month. And it's the old-fashioned finish. And what they did was they made a red ale, and then after they had aged it in our casks, they took it out and then they added orange peel and anise. So it has a very interesting flavor. And yeah, so it's pretty good. It's wildly different to this. It's like night and day. Obviously, you've got all of the kind of rich caramel, dark chocolate, you got that bitterness of smoke. And then for the other one, it's much more kind of like it's much more fruit led, obviously, from the orange, but you're getting some cherry in there as well. And it's just wild to see, like, you know, completely different liquids. But yeah, they know what they're doing. They're hugely experimental. They're always kind of pushing it to try and find new funky ways to make beer. So I feel like collaborating with them to make a beer cask finish, it kind of almost made the process quite easy for us, because, you know, they have experience with kind of playing around with stuff. And for us, with the whiskey side of things, it just meant that the whiskey had to be tasted very regularly. So it's a good excuse to drink more whiskey. You know, it's like, this is very delicate, we've got to taste it every week.
And they're only down the road from you as well. My brother is like the most boring person when it comes to food and drink. Like he'd have Rice Krispies for dinner when he was younger. Like, you know, that was the extent. He'd have like pasta with butter on it and no sauce. But when he became an adult, that carried on into his drinking. He was like Corona and Heineken. But he just moved in about 3 months ago next to the Rascals HQ. And we went up to Dublin about 3 weeks ago. And I said, I'll meet you for a pint. Where I'll meet you. He's like, oh, I'm drinking in the Rascals HQ. And I couldn't believe it. He was drinking Rascals, like, you know, IPAs and stuff and red ales. And I was like, Jesus Christ, what's happened to you? So Rascals have converted at least one person anyway onto craft beer. So there you go.
That's really a testament to how innovative they are. You know, even with their packaging, with everything that they do, I feel like they're very focused, and they're just really, really good at making beer. And this is as someone who isn't really a beer drinker, but I feel like they make really, really good stuff. So anyone have any thoughts on the smoked stout?
Well, Alan in the chat there said that he gets bubble gum on it. So that maybe ties in what you were saying about candy floss. There's definitely those sweeter kind of fruity notes hanging around. And it would be great if anyone else had any thoughts on it before we moved on from that one. If anyone's, as I was mentioning to you, Stephanie, before we came live, they're always a bit quiet for the first 20 minutes, and then they open up on the second or third whiskey, you know. Relax the fingers.
It's fine. I'm the same one I read as well. You got to have the first whiskey to kind of like acclimatize, and then after that you can get into it, and that's okay. So we've gone through the Dubliner beer cask, so now we're going to move on to the Liberties range. So this is kind of like a very different direction from the smoked stout. So with the Dubliner being kind of like very, very accessible, you know, Ron Steele, exactly what it says on the tin. What we're moving into now is kind of like I guess the fancier end of things. So I love this range because I'm a very big single malt fan. And so the Liberties range from Copper Alley up is all single malts. And so what we're going to be trying first is Copper Alley. So if I'm going too fast going through the whiskies, please let me know. And if I'm not going fast enough, then I'm pretty sure I could probably ramp the enthusiasm up to 11 and speed through it. But yeah, please get your Copper Alley. So it's
just before while people are getting their Copper Alley in front of them, I forgot to mention, I think the other one is 36 euros at Celtic Whiskey. The Dubliner coffee stout or beer stout finish. So if you are interested, that's not a bad price point for that kind of whiskey. So there you go.
For the finish, how delicious. Tastes like candy floss or bubble gum. I'm sold. I definitely have a sweet tooth though, so I'm always a fan of anything where there's butter or candy floss or bubble gum. I am sold. That's it. That's me done for the day. But yeah, so moving on to the Liberties range, we're going to start off with Copper Alley. So pour yourself a little glass. It's always so strange when you do these and you just feel like a little crazy person, just like constantly coming up with like new whiskey glasses, being like, yes, this is my job now. I need to do this for the research part. Okay, so Copper Alley, what is it? It is a single malt. It is 10 years old. It's double distilled. The ABV is 46%, and then the finish is ex-bourbon. So it stays in ex-bourbon casks for 10 years, and then we take it out and we put them into 30-year-old Oloroso sherry butts that are 500 liters. So essentially, we found these kind of giant sherry butts that were, I'm not sure of which area they came from, but our old master distiller essentially was on a trip scouting out some casks, and he pops over to Spain and he's like, you've got some really nice casks, and they get along, and they're like, you should have dinner in our house. And he's like, grand. He goes into their house and they have these really old casks, and he's like, what are those casks? I didn't see those earlier. And they're like, oh, this is like our family treasure, you know, like we've been aging sherry for over 30 years in these casks. And he's like, how much are the casks? They're like, they're not for sale. They're like family heirlooms. By the end of the night, he was so charismatic that he had managed to convince them to sell him 10 of these sherry butts. So we were really, really lucky to get these beautiful casks. And honestly, I feel like Copper Alley is probably my favorite whiskey in the range. With the double distillation and with those beautiful casks, I just think that it's just an absolute winner. So yeah, I mean, the Liberties, please drink away. Let me know any of your tasting notes. I'm going to kind of start going into the story of Copper Alley, so you have a little something to sip on while I'm regaling you with tales from old Ireland. But yeah, it's just beautiful whiskey. Double distillation gives it that wonderful, wonderful mouthfeel. And then there's almost this element of like, I feel like it's kind of like if you found a Christmas pudding that your grandmother made in like the 80s in the attic. So I feel like, and that's not meant to put anyone off. I think it's delicious. But it's just, I feel like, you know, obviously with the sherry finish, you're going to get a lot of juicy notes, a lot of dried fruit notes, a lot of Christmas cake notes, but there is that element of like, there's just that tiny bit of mustiness. And I really, really love it. So for me, that's how I describe it. And, you know, I'm probably going to be fired for describing it so terribly, but I feel like it's apt, it's delicious. And I would absolutely eat Christmas cake in the attic from the 80s. Says a lot about it.
So it's quite sulfuric. It's got a huge sherry nose though.
Yeah, but there's definitely you know, I feel like on the nose it has all of the notes you kind of expect. It's really, really fruity and juicy, and then when you actually taste it, I feel like that's when the age of the casks kind of come through. That's where you're getting some of that mustiness, and I feel like it kind of balances out. So I always find that when you're smelling it, or someone is smelling it from the first time, they kind of expect it to be much sweeter than it actually is. But that's just me. So yeah, okay, so let me talk to you guys about the Liberties. So our distillery is actually based in the Liberties. So we are the Dublin Liberties Distillery. And so, you know, there's a lot of whiskies that kind of fall under our umbrella. So we've got the Dubliner range, we have Dead Rabbit Irish whiskey, and then we also have the Liberties that fall under our umbrella. And so we like to focus on single malts for the Liberties range. So this is, as I said, 10 years old, single malt, and you can see kind of we've gone for something that's a little bit more traditional in design. And so each bottle in the Liberties range has its own story. And so the idea is that, you know, because there's a huge wealth of history within the area of the Liberties. And so the idea was that every time you have a bottle, you're kind of being brought to another new part. And so for Copper Alley, the story is, so there is an alley called Copper Alley in the Liberties area. It was considered to be one of the oldest streets in Dublin, and it was named after a coin because it's estimated that one of the first coins in Ireland was minted in the 17th century on Copper Alley. And so the label is inspired by the color of the coin that was minted on the street and its Celtic Irish origins. So that's the PG story. So the Liberties was an area that was full of murder and mystery and a lot of strange goings on. And actually, one of the really interesting things about Copper Alley was the fact that I don't know if it exists today, but in Darky Kelly's, you can definitely see bits of it. But essentially on Copper Alley, there was a secret line of copper in the street. And if you followed this secret line of copper, you would find yourself in what was considered to be the best brothel in Ireland in the 1700s/1800s. And it was only if you knew to follow the copper line that you would find it. So it's pretty interesting. It actually led into, I believe it led into Darky Kelly and then down. So you would kind of go into the bar, everything seems normal, and then you would kind of go and find this back area, and then you would kind of go and that was it. But it was said that it was so good that once you went in, it would be very difficult to find your way out because you'd be so entranced by the beauty that existed there. And obviously there's a lot of fun stories to do with I mean, I say fun, interesting stories to do with some of the characters there. So, you know, you've got stories around witchcraft and murder, obviously. So yeah, it's a pretty interesting segment within the Liberties with a lot of history, but I think it's fun that we kind of, you know, it's like, hey, there was a coin here, but also, you know, if you followed the path, you would find yourself in this very questionable, but possibly very exciting place. But yeah, so that's the Copper Alley. And then, so, I mean, I've already kind of spoken about the Liberties area, but this is a little bit about the history of it. And it's actually really a key spot for Irish whiskey history in general. So the Liberties were very common in Normandy, and so there was a lot of cities that had an area that was known as the Liberties. So what would happen is that you would usually have city walls. So whoever controlled the land would usually control the city walls, and they would actually gift out areas outside of the city walls to people that they considered either people that they wanted to remain as an ally, or they wanted to buy their allyship, and they would be like, hey, you can have this piece of land. So it meant that they could collect the taxes and they could control what happened on the land. It also, it worked well for the people who controlled the city because it meant that they didn't really have to regulate outside of the city walls. So it meant that they didn't have to expend as much on guards, that they didn't have to fight to get their taxes, and it kind of left all of that responsibility to someone else. And so what usually ended up happening was somebody would lay claim to part of the Liberties, but they wouldn't be able to enforce anything. So it became this lawless area, and everything that was considered to be unsavory was pushed out of the city and into the Liberties. So you would have blacksmithing, you would have butchery, you would have tannery, you would have distilling, you would have brewing, you would have ladies of the night. So anything that was considered faux pas or just like, yeah, we don't want it in the city because our city is a nice clean city, they would just kind of push it out into the Liberties, and it was someone else's problem. Now, the Liberties of Dublin was given to the Royal Abbey of Thomas, which is controlled by the Earl of Meath. Now, if he's living in Meath, he's not really going to have a lot of control over what's going on in that area outside of Dublin City. So, you know, he wasn't really able to kind of collect his taxes or to ensure that everything was running legally, and thus that's why there was probably a lot of unsavory activity in that area. Now, in the 1800s, we have what is known as the golden era of Irish whiskey, and that was when Irish whiskey was essentially ruling the world. We were like 60% of all global whiskey sales. And one of the, I guess, the kind of heart of all of that distillation could be considered to be in the Liberties. So the Liberties at the time was home to around 40 breweries and distilleries, and was home to the largest brewery in the world, which was Guinness, and the world's largest distillery, which was the George Roe Distillery in the 1880s. So it had an area that was known as the Golden Triangle, and the big four, John Jameson, William Jameson, John Perris, and George Roe, were all located there. It became the centre of distillation for Ireland, and eventually the centre of distillation through the British Empire, as Scotch production at that time was very rural, small scale, and scattered. And so, you know, at this stage in the 1800s, Irish whiskey, specifically Dublin whiskey, would have been considered the kind of whiskey of the aristocrats of the British Empire. And, you know, when there was the phylloxera that happened over in France that kind of was destroying the vineyards, what happened was they adopted kind of Dublin whiskey as their tipple of choice after dinner. And because the British Empire essentially stretched as far as the eye could see, it meant that Irish whiskey was also traveling as far as the eye could see, which was obviously very beneficial and definitely helped us to achieve the, you know, we are the most widely dispersed whiskey at that time. Now, after the walls came down, the Liberties area for Dublin kept its name. Now, in a lot of places where they had Liberties, they actually didn't keep the name of the Liberties. Once they took the city walls down, they rezoned everything and they ended up changing the names of a lot of places. But in Dublin, the Liberties kept the name, and it remains a key cultural hub in Dublin city today. Now, what's fascinating is that the size of the Liberties is actually tiny. So you can walk from one end to the other in 15 minutes. Like, probably less. Like, I'm a very lackadaisical walker. Like, I'm much more of a kind of like general stroll person, but it's tiny. When you consider the amount of industrialization that happened in just this small area within the city, and the fact that there is so much of Irish whiskey's history embedded in this very, very small area, is really, really interesting. I'm going to move on to the next whiskey, but does anybody have any questions, or does anybody want to share any of their tasting notes or opinions on Copper Alley before we move on to the next?
We've a few coming in there into the chat. I'm getting plum jam, nutmeg, plum jam, not plum and jam, nutmeg licorice on the nose. So really great tasting notes coming in there. DC says, I love the spicy notes and the sherry influence. AK says, Dorcas Darkey Kelly died 7th of January 1761, was an Irish brothel keeper and alleged serial killer who was burned at the stake in 1761. Interesting. So I hope that hasn't spoiled some of your story.
No, so that's like super interesting, but the reason she was burnt at the stake was because she was accused of being a witch. So she was one of the people that was burned at the stake for alleged witchcraft. But yeah, she's a fascinating character. But it's like, it's one of those things where like you kind of don't really expect that to be a story that you just casually come across in Dublin. But yeah, it's definitely, it just kind of goes to show that if you dig a little bit past the surface, there's always some strange stuff going on.
No, very exciting.
Are we ready to move on to the next one, which is called Murder Lane? All right.
Very apt.
Next whiskey is 13 years old, single malt. Now, in a difference to the Copper Alley, this whiskey is actually triple distilled instead of double distilled. So I should also mention, I don't think I did, but all of the whiskeys in the Liberties range that we're tasting tonight are all non-chill filtered. But I always I think one of the reasons why I really, really love the Copper Alley is because it's the only double distilled one, so there's definitely a little bit more punch in that, whereas Murder Lane and Keeper's Coin is triple distilled, so there will be a slight difference in I guess texture on the palate, but yeah. So 13 years old, single malt, triple distilled, 46% ABV. That's kind of the standard for the Liberties range so far. Again, we have this aged for 13 years in ex-bourbon, and it's finished in Hungarian oak that is seasoned with Tokaj. So Tokaj just being a Hungarian dessert wine. Now, this one I find is a really, really interesting whiskey. It's really, really light and really delicate. Huge floral notes and tropical notes, and what you are tasting today is actually batch 2. So with batch 1, we had the whiskey in the Tokaj barrels for about 8 months, and then for batch 2 we actually had another batch of casks, so it's first fill again, but this time we left them for another about 6 weeks. So there is a slight difference between batch 1 and batch 2. And for me, that difference comes across in the florality. So with batch 1, you know, you had those very kind of definitive notes of, you know, there was a lot of coconut and gorse, and there was a little bit of vanilla, and you definitely got kind of those raisin notes, golden raisins even, and you had a little bit of florality, with the gorse and some orange blossom. But with batch 2, I just feel like the florality has just gone up to like 11. So this is where I'm getting so many more. So I'm getting more rose, geranium. It's really, I find that with batch 2, it just kind of like really amped up any of the floral notes. You're still getting those tropical notes. Like as soon as I put my nose in the glass, I'm just like, oh, it's coconut. But once you get past the coconut, you're going to get into kind of those realms of just like, it's almost like a floral meadow in spring. And yeah, so the other thing is that with the Tokai cask, I mean, obviously it's a dessert wine, so it's much lighter in style than, say, the sherry has been. So the finish on this one isn't as long. The spice on this isn't as kind of long or as aggressive as it has been on the other ones. With this one, I find that there is, because you have the florality, there's also, I feel like a tiny bit of bitterness where you're getting something that's almost like blackberry leaf. And that's what I find is balancing this out, is that you're getting almost like a green note as opposed to spice, which we found in the others. So yeah.
It's really interesting. I get a lot of like custard and almost flan kind of notes to the nose.
Yeah.
Sekru in the chat there, so I'm not getting many floral or tropical notes. I got lots of red fruit, especially raspberry. We did an eau de vie tasting with some like cherry eau de vie from like 25 years old. It was phenomenal.
Oh, nice.
And there's a lot of flavors that I think that's definitely come through in a good way in this that remind me of tasting that. And so I definitely see what Seku's saying about red fruit and especially raspberry. So apologies if I'm butchering the pronunciation of your name there, but that's just me. I'm terrible like that.
No, I do find that there is kind of like there is like fig as well in it, but there's also almost like cranberry on the finish. So there is some fruit in it, but I guess I was just hit by kind of flowers, but maybe I just spent too much time in the garden when I was drinking it. Potentially.
No, but this is the beautiful thing. It's all very subjective, So
yeah.
there's no, I don't think there's a right answer. So
no, definitely not. Definitely not. If anyone says definitively this is what it is, then you should just not listen to that person. But yeah, again, I mean, like,
that's for wine tasting.
Yeah, like even wine people, like, I don't know. I mean, like, not to take anything away, I just think that they're a bit insane. Some of my friends are training to be sommeliers, and when I drink with them, it's a completely different experience than drinking with whiskey drinkers, Yeah. There's just like it's like they're speaking an alien language, and I'm like, I just want to enjoy it. It's really good. It's delicious. I like these flavors. One thing I would say is that the sweetness that I get from this is kind of like a coconut sugar. So I really like, I don't know what it is, but for me, this is really, really tropical and floral. And again, because this is 46%, I probably should have said it with the Copper Alley, but I do encourage you to try it with a tiny drop of water. For me, the water increases the florality. So maybe you might get more flowers with a tiny drop of water. Because I found that it just kind of like just made all of those flowers come really to the fore. And yeah, so I really, really like this one because I just think it's quite interesting, and it's not like, it's quite different with nose versus palate, and with the finish, etc., etc. I just think it's a very different kind of whiskey in comparison to a lot of stuff that even stuff that we've been tasting so far. It's just kind of like it sits on its own. It's a little delicate one. I like it.
No, it's good. It's I just had a drop of water there, and I definitely get more kind of citrusy, peachy notes after that. Personally, that's just my own. Yeah, and this is 160 euros at Celtic, and I didn't say it, I don't think, with the Copper Alley, which is 60 euros. So both fantastic whiskies, but you are coming up with quite a jump in price here with the 160. That's Middleton very rare territory.
Yep. I think they were just like, well, these are expensive casks and it's slightly older. So they that's what they decided upon. And I don't get paid to set prices and stuff. I would make everything free for me, obviously. I'd be like, hey, give me all the stuff. But yeah, so it is quite a jump, but it is a very different kind of whiskey. And it's pretty nice to try it, definitely. And if you like it, then of course, please purchase it on Celtic Whiskey Shop online.
Please do.
So obviously on the theme of murder and mayhem, this is called Murder Lane. Now, Murder Lane has been called after an unmarked alleyway that was known as Murdering Lane. It connects Bow Street and James's Street. There is evidence galore to show that in the early 1600s, many men, women, and children met an unfortunate end on that lane. It was known as Murdering Lane until 1876. Now, this lane is a very popular lane, and if you've ever come out of, oh gosh, I can't remember. There's a Forbidden Fruit Festival. Like, if you've ever been in Dublin and been a Forbidden Fruit, if you turn right and kind of just keep wandering, you will eventually come to this lane. And it's quite unnerving if it's dark. The walls are very high, it's quite steep, it's stepped and it's curved. So I can absolutely understand why this was the lane that people were like, you know what, we're just gonna kill people at this lane. Because once you start going up, there's nowhere to run. Like, it's literally like, and you're on stairs. I mean, like, my hand-eye coordination, like, I would be falling down those stairs. But yeah, it's actually the prime spot for murder. Not that I advocate for murder, but just it's pretty interesting that it really does kind of live up to that name, and it has a slightly creepy feel to it. But yeah, it was known as Murdering Lane until 1876. And in 1876, they had, like, I guess the equivalent of a Dublin City Council meeting to consider, like, you know, maybe we should change the name of Murdering Lane, because, like, you know, it's probably off-putting to tourists and not very good for the city. And it was laughed at. This proposal was laughed at. They were like, well, like, how will people know where to avoid getting murdered if we don't name it Murdering Lane? And the proposed name was, I think it was Oliver Cromwell Alley, potentially. But yeah, it was promptly shot down.
Which would put more people off.
You know? But this will stop them getting murdered. Yeah, I think he was shot down for that idea, but then eventually they were like, actually, he raises a very valid point. We probably don't want to have, you know, a key like alleyway in our city known as the lane to go get murdered. So yeah, let's jazz it up. I actually don't remember what they called it, but they did change the name. But it is pretty funny that it was over 200 years before they decided to change the name. And like, the records are in the 1600s to say it was called Murdering Lane. Like, who knows how long it was called Murdering Lane before that. But yeah, I just thought it was pretty interesting that when whoever raised it in their meeting was like, yeah, we should change it. They were like, no. And they're like, oh, wait, maybe. But yes, I hope that you're enjoying this whiskey. Please let me know what your thoughts are, or your thoughts on Murdering Lane, if that's a place that you would go. Am I selling Dublin? Is it? I mean, Fáilte Ireland should really hire me because I'm selling it. There's so much murder and there's people being burned at the stake. It's a great city to visit.
It's like the Vikings calling Greenland Iceland and Iceland Greenland or whatever, you know.
Yeah, because we need more people to go there. So, as I said, we are all under the umbrella of the Dublin Liberties Distillery, which is situated smack bang in the middle of the Liberties. So, this seems a little bit out, but if you remember, I was talking about the walls just coming down in previous slides. So, even after the walls came down, the Liberties still kept the name and is now a focal point of the Irish whiskey revolution. So, we are actually one of 5 distilleries in the area. So, you've got the New Row & Co., you've got Pierce Lyons, you have Teelings, us, and oh my gosh, have I forgotten someone?
Pierce or
Pierce.
Pierce, Teelings, Rowan Co, you guys.
Us. Mystery 5th one. Maybe I can't count today. I have been tasting these whiskies beforehand. Ignore my terrible math. There are a number of distilleries that are built and have started distilling within the Liberties area because obviously it has such a rich history. And, you know, each distillery is kind of focusing on different styles. And it's just really, really amazing to be kind of at, you know, one of the focal points of the Irish whiskey revolution. So It's a really beautiful kind of energy that it's bringing to this area of the city. And obviously, if you haven't made your way down, I know that we are under various restrictions, but when it's safe and you feel comfortable to do so, if you do have the chance, you can absolutely visit all of the distilleries because they're all within walking distance of each other. And it's really, really nice to see how each distillery has a very distinct identity, and the liquid that they're making is very, very specific to the distillery. So it's really, really nice to see that there's, you know, a huge amount of versatility within that area, especially because it was such a core part of Irish whiskey history in general.
Is Stillgarden in the Liberties? Is it the Stillgarden distillery?
No, it's kind of just outside it, so it's technically not considered the Liberties area. I mean, I was going to say Jameson, but like because they put that, didn't they put like a micro still in there so that they could theoretically be called a distillery in Jameson Street?
I don't know.
Yeah. I know there was plans, and I know that they renovated, and I think that they might have a tiny still in there just so they can say we are a distillery. I'm not sure if that has happened yet.
Jameson, that's over across the river down by Smithfields, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Is that technically still the Liberties? Is it? I don't know. Like I don't know Dublin at all. Like
I had a map of the Liberties. I feel like I should know this. Someone told me it was the Liberties, and I can walk to it. So I'm gonna say yes.
I also, on what you were just saying there, we visited except one of my colleagues visited the Liberties after Whiskey Live Dublin 2019, and it was fantastic. We were really, really hungover doing it, so it's never a good time to visit the city. But it was a really, really good tour, definitely. So I would recommend. It's a beautiful building, and the bar at the end is really nice.
Thank you. I'm really glad that you had a good time. So yeah, I mean, like you can see the kind of outside of the building there. I didn't add a photo of the bar because I didn't want to kind of go into too much detail. But essentially, we are on Mill Street, and it's a repurposed building. So the building is over 400 years old. And it used to be used as a tannery where they actually skinned rabbits, which I find very funny because we also have Dead Rabbit under our umbrella. And then it was a mill, it was a furniture shop. It's kind of had a multitude of uses in its lifetime. And then we bought it over. And so when we bought it over, it didn't look like that. So they had plastered up all of the original stonework, and we had to kind of remove that plaster to get to the beautiful stonework within. And the building, essentially, it's trying to preserve as much of the original, I guess, character of the building, but also we have to run a distillery there. So it's like a really beautiful blend of very, very modern versus kind of, you know, a building that's 400 years old. So there's a lot of characteristics, like there's the grain door where they used to get grain into the mills, so that's still there. It doesn't operate as a door because if you opened it you would just fall on the street, but the door is still there. But yeah, it's a really, really beautiful building, and it is really, really nice to see, you know, a building that is that old where, you know, I know that I work for the company, but I love the building. I think it's really, really beautiful, and I really appreciate the fact that they very easily could have knocked it down and been like, we're going to build a shiny new building, and instead they were like, no, this building is beautiful. And so they've tried to preserve as much of that as possible. What was cool was they didn't know this when they bought over the building, but there's actually a water source directly underneath the building. So 30 meters down, we have a well, and well, we found a water source, we've created a well, and the water happens to be perfect for distilling. So like jammy. Just jammy. I feel like that's really good karma. They were like, building will protect you. And the building's like, the building provides.
Well, if I remember correctly from when I visited, it was the one really tacky bit of the tour. It was when there's like a projecting light that shines down the like a faux river under your feet. Yeah. I was like, this is poxy. But other than that, the tour was great.
Yeah. That's the very beginning of tour. It's got those weird soothing water sounds as well. It's like it's almost like I expect to hear whales sometimes, but you know, we gotta like, you know, make sure that you get the whole story. But yeah, they do project water down. I mean, some people find it really cool. I'm obviously fascinated by like anything shiny, so I was like, that's cool. But I wasn't very easily entertained. We do also have 3 pot stills. They were made for us by Carl over in Germany. And we have the first still is 10,000 litres, and then the next 2 stills are both 6,000 litres, which was so our previous master distiller is a gentleman by the name of Darrell McNally, and he used to work in Bushmills, and he had a similar setup there. So when he came down, he was like, I want to have a very, a similar setup. So he was like, I find that having the last 2 stills the same size is just efficient, and it does what I needed to do. And so yeah, so instead of having 3 different sizes, the last 2 are the same size. There's been a lot of kind of back and forth. So there's a lot of people that work in that building that have given names to these stills, and none of the names have stuck. So I guarantee you, if you were to go in for a tour on like a Monday, you would find out that they have like 3 very interesting names. And then you go in on a Friday and someone else is like, so these are the names, and they're completely different. So they don't have names. Everyone has assigned their own name, so that there isn't the little cute story of this still is named so and so because of X, Y, and Z. It's like literally everyone has been putting a name on those stills, so feel free to call them whatever you like when you visit. All right, probably the most exciting thing, I mean, this is probably really terrible, but I mean, I've talked a lot about murder. I'm very excitable. You can kind of gauge my character at this point. The River of Fire within the Liberties. So, June 18th, 1875, we are peak golden era. This is when Ireland is like ruling the whiskey world. There was a warehouse in the Liberties that went on fire. The warehouse was aging 5,000 barrels of whiskey. It resulted in a lava-like explosion and a river of fire running through the Liberties. It was 400 meters long, 6 inches deep, and it ran along the street in front of our distillery. So the actual river of fire ran down Mill Street. So, I mean, it's just a fascinating story. So, I mean, you've got this massive fire, and it's kind of unlike anything that we would have experienced before that. And then you had a policeman. So people are trying to, taking pots of water and trying to throw it over, but it's a river of alcohol that's on fire. The water isn't really that effective. So one of the policemen was like, I know, we'll build a wall of poo. So he asked all of the residents in the area to collect any excrement from any of the, because at this stage you would have had people that would have been raising pigs in their back garden, and they would have had a horse maybe, or a cow. And so he tried to build a wall of excrement, of animal excrement, to stop this river of fire, which apparently it did work. Now, 24 people were unfortunately hospitalized and 13 people died, but not for the reasons you might think. So you would think, oh my gosh, these people must have died from burns. No, these people died because they were drinking from the river of alcohol that was on fire. So there were some people that rushed into their homes, got their pots and pans with water and threw them on the fire to try and put it out. And then there was the other people who ran into their houses, got pots and pans and scooped up the liquid because, why not? There's a river of whiskey flowing right outside your door. So yeah, so they all decided they were going to drink. There is a story where apparently someone was drinking from their shoe, which I think might have been a touch unhygienic, but unfortunately, the 13 people passed away and 24 people were hospitalized due to essentially drinking very, very dirty alcohol that was on fire, which it just doesn't seem like a good idea. So in total, this caused around €6 million in today's money in damages, and for this reason, maturation of whiskey is not allowed within Dublin City. So we are going to move on to the next and final whiskey of the evening, Keeper's Coin. So,
while we're pouring that, sorry, so there's just a couple of comments came in there. Sekru said, could it be the old Powers place that's now the NCAD? That's the old John's Lane stills. But I suppose I don't think they're distilling. I think that's reference to the vanished Dublin Liberties distillery, Liberties-based distillery that we couldn't think of.
Like that fifth one that I can't remember.
Alan Crowe says, when will the distillery reopen to the public? Do you have a date yet, or?
So we don't have a date right now. So because we are quite a small production, and essentially we've been trying to cocoon our distillery team. So, you know, anyone who works in the distillery, like myself, I would normally be based in the distillery. We will not be allowed in until, I guess, everyone is vaccinated and they deem it safe, because our distilling team is quite small. So if anyone was to get sick, it would completely, you know, destroy our production. And we're so early on in building the distillery that the kind of the guys above were like, it's too big a risk. So until we can figure out the kind of a way that's very safe, where our distilling team is protected, the general public is protected, and people who are giving tours, we're probably going to stay closed for the next while, I'd say. But if you follow the Dublin Liberties Distillery on Instagram, it will definitely give you an update of when the distillery is back open to the public.
Excellent.
Any other
so tell
questions?
us about the Keeper's Coin.
Keeper's Coin! Oh my gosh. Okay, so obviously, you know, by now I'm very excitable, but I love this whiskey. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I mean, it's 16 years old. It is a single malt, again, with the triple distillation. ABV is 46, non-chill filtered. So, it, you know, within the Liberties range, we're trying to keep it consistent with the fact that it's a single malt, the ABV, non-chill filtered. So this one spent about 16 years in ex-bourbon casks, and then we took them out and we put them into PX Sherry Hogshead casks. And it's just delicious. It's really, it's like one of my favorite whiskeys. I really like whiskey, so you're going to hear this a lot. But it's just, it's so rich. It's so, it's very juicy on the nose. You get a lot of the kind of typical Pedro Jimenez flavors. So you're going to get a lot of those kind of dark berry notes, a lot of the almost treacle sweetness on the nose. But it's also kind of tempered a little bit with more oak. I find there's kind of a stronger oak note in this than there has been in the previous whiskies. And then there's a little bit of spice. There's not too much spice, but there's just enough to kind of balance out that sweetness, I think.
There's a real kind of fudge and banana notes to the nose. It's really interesting.
Yeah, it's like, it's almost like if you were to create an ice cream sundae with like Pedro Jimenez and maple syrup and just jamming a load of fruits in there. Like there's a lot of like rich blackberry. It's like decadence in a bottle.
I was thinking more banoffee pie, but yeah, no, I can see definitely ice cream sundae. Yeah. Because it does have those kind of pastry caramelly notes, which is why I was thinking, like, you know, it works real. But we used to have a dessert in the bar when we go back to 2017 that was PX on ice cream, like real Pedro Jimenez sherry. It was brilliant.
Oh man, the Pedro Jimenez on vanilla ice cream is just sublime with a tiny little like of sea salt. Oh man, you're in heaven. Oh my gosh. Yes. So, well, I have, you know, a background as a cocktail bartender, and, you know, one of my favorite like flavor combinations is like essentially any dark spirit with Pedro Jimenez, you know, like even a bit of cognac and Pedro Jimenez, like it's
like a velvet old fashioned.
Oh my gosh. It's just, I feel like it's something that everyone should have a bottle of Pedro Jimenez in their house.
We did or was invited on this on-trade event. It was the launch of the Redbreast 27 the end of 2019, and they had they give us this like 3-course meal, and with it you had cocktails going, and one of them was Redbreast 12. Not to plug another brand on your tasting, but it was Redbreast 12. I mean, Redbreast 12 is like, you know, so ubiquitous in the Irish whiskey industry, but it was Redbreast 12 and PX old fashioned, and it was unbelievable.
It adds so
one
much
fella there at our
complexity.
table who we were drinking, who was like, "This is sacrilege! You can't put Redbreast in a cocktail," and everyone else was like, "Oh, this is so tasty."
Yeah. Well, I mean, like one of the things that, you know, from working in bars for so long, one of the things that I guess kind of helped me to drive towards Irish whiskey was the fact that your base in your cocktail is really, really important. And so I am 100% of the opinion that if you like cocktails and you're a cocktail drinker, that, you know, if you have something as delicious as Keeper's Coin, you might, like, if you want to, I feel like there should be no judgment. Like if you made a cocktail with, you know, even just an old fashioned, it's just a different way of consuming the liquid. But, you know, with a cocktail, your base is really setting the tone for what your cocktail is. So, and you can notice that straight away. If you use like a very cheap whiskey versus, you know, something like Woodford Reserve in an old fashioned, you're definitely going to notice it, even in a whiskey sour, you know. So yeah, I'm
well,
definitely
I'm
an
also on
advocate.
these tastings. We get asked this question a lot about what we think about, by guests who come on or customers who come on, and they're like, oh, what do you think about adding ice or adding water or mixing with this or that? And we always say, once you're drinking Irish whiskey, then we're happy. No matter how you're consuming it, if you're consuming it, then you're helping the industry, and that's the main thing. Whether you're like putting it with a load of Diet Coke or whether you put it in a cocktail, it doesn't matter. You're buying the product. We love you.
Yeah, 100%. And it also removes the kind of gatekeeping element that existed, I think, within the world of whiskey in general about 10 years ago, where it was considered kind of like you could only drink whiskey this very specific way and only certain people could drink whiskey. Whereas now I feel like, like people are drinking whiskey and tonic. Whiskey and tonic is fantastic in the summer weather, like tiny bit of lemon or orange and like you're golden, like off you go in the sunset. And like, do you really want to be sipping on like a single malt, when it's like 20 degrees outside and it's very sunny? Sometimes you need something that's a little bit more refreshing. So I'm 100% of the opinion that like, just drink it however you like it. If you want to drink it out of a shoe, drink it out of a shoe. I don't recommend it, but you could.
We got a question there from speaking of drinking Liberties whiskey and good whiskey. AK says, any plans to release anything else in the Liberties range, or are you going to stick with the current range until your whiskey matures?
So we do have plans for future whiskey. So one of the whiskeys is currently being finalized right now. I unfortunately cannot tell you the details, but I can tell you is that it is delicious. And hopefully we should have that on the market. What are we now? July. I'm thinking that will probably be either towards the end of this year or the very beginning of next year. So there is definitely something coming out in the near future. But we're currently in the bottling design aspect. So the liquid has been finalized. The liquid is delicious. And it's again following the kind of like template that we seem to have set up here, where it's going to be 46 ABV, it's going to be non-chill filtered, it's going to be a single malt, and then we're going to we're keeping the same general gist of having it aged in ex-bourbon for X amount of time, and then we're finishing it off in a separate barrel. This also, I didn't mention, but this is also batch 2 for Keeper's Coin. So here we are again, and it's the same thing where batch 1, we had them in the barrels, took them out, but for batch 2, we got kind of our next batch of barrels. So it's again first fill, Pedro Jimenez Hogshead, and again, we left this one a little bit longer. And so so with the Murder Lane, I definitely found a bigger difference between batch 1 and batch 2. I find with the Pedro Jimenez, there isn't as much of a difference. I think that they're both just like, I just think it's a solid liquid. So I don't think there is as much of a difference as there is for me personally between batch 1 and batch 2 for the 13-year-old. There is a slight difference. I do think there is a little bit more oak in this one.
We used to, when the Celtic Whiskey Bar, when the Celtic Whiskey Bar first opened, we sold, we have a Clarny cask. It's our own hand filled, as in you fill your own bottle. In the bar. And the first one we had when we opened was a 16-year-old PX cask finish, and it was a 60-year-old Pedro Jimenez cask.
Nice.
And it was phenomenal. It won Irish Whiskey of the not Irish Whiskey of the Year, but it won Single Cask Whiskey of the Year in the 2017 Irish Whiskey Awards. It was a phenomenal drop of whiskey. And this one is not quite as good, but it's up there. It reminds me a lot of it. So yeah,
it's kind of, I personally don't think you can go wrong if you're mixing or finishing something in Pedro Jimenez, because I am just hardcore Pedro Jimenez fan. That's like my jam. I love it. I think it's great. So I personally don't think you could ever go wrong. I think you could age anything in Pedro. You could age whatever you like, and it's going to taste delicious. All right, so
we got one more question there. Sorry, from DC. Is there an option to buy casks from the distillery?
There is an option to buy casks at the distillery. I will pass along the email of the person and to get a brochure for casks to Luke, and then Luke can pass it on to your lovely self. But yeah, there is absolutely an option for caskage.
We're also, and sorry, for Celtic Whiskey, we're also doing a cask selling option. So the Celtic Whiskey website has some information on barrels that Celtic Whiskey are currently selling. So there's also casks there. But yeah, I'll pass you on your details from Stephanie. So yeah, perfect.
Okay, So yeah, the story for this one I think is pretty cool. So yeah, in the 1600s, under Christchurch Cathedral, there were a series of crypts that were used as illicit drinking dens. So essentially, people were breaking into crypts and having speakeasies. So I mean, I like to think that the world's first speakeasies were actually under Christchurch, but like no one, agrees with me. But that's my thoughts as a cocktail person. But yeah, so you would have different people set up at different parts of the crypt. And to differentiate, they would have their own minted coins. So you could always it was almost like you didn't have secret handshakes and you didn't have secret codes, but you kind of had this coin, and that was like the marker for you to be allowed to go into this illicit drinking den and a drink with the bartender, I guess. So yeah, that's where the name comes from the barkeeper's coin. Yeah, so when they were excavating underneath Christchurch Cathedral, when they were doing renovations, they actually unearthed a purse full of silver coins and a number of leather bottles still containing alcohol. I have no idea where those bottles are. I really wish I could taste it, because I just want to taste like musty, delicious whiskey that's been under Christchurch for ages. So if anyone has tasted it, please let me know so I can live vicariously through you. But I'm going to assume that no one on this call has had the chance to like get a taste of those. I don't even know if they'd be safe for human consumption, but I would still try it. Probably.
Definitely worth trying. Yeah, it probably wouldn't
100%.
taste great, but.
Yeah. But like, it's good to know. It's good to have that comparison point, But yeah, so that's essentially it. I have walked you through some of the history of the Liberties, and we have tasted a couple of delicious whiskies, and this is the end of my presentation. So
Fantastic.
Please let me know if you had a favorite, what you think about the Keeper's Coin, and all of the whiskies that we have tasted so far are available on the Celtic Whisky Shop website, as Luke has highlighted, so you now know where you can find this delicious liquid gold.
Yeah, no, definitely available on the Celtic Whisky Shop. I really have enjoyed the tasting stuff. I think just before we move on to the last few comments, and I'd love to hear what everyone's, as we do at the end of all these tastings, people rank their order. So please, everyone listening, please do put in what you thought was the best. I think it's 300 and something, this one from Celtic. I actually don't have that in front of me.
320.
320. So yeah, it's premium price point, but it is a really good whiskey. That was definitely my favorite of the four, sorry, the three Liberties I meant. So AK also here says one of the best tastings I've been to, not just the whiskey, great presentation, you sell the whiskey very well, so well done, fantastic.
Thank you very much.
And he also gives his ranking, which is 4, 2, 3, 1, so he liked, that would be the Keeper's Coin, the Copper Alley, and then Murder Lane, and then the Dubliner. DC says Keeper's Coin is a really good whiskey, but I prefer the Copper Alley. There's always a bottle at home. James says Murder Lane is top of that list. Fantastic. So yeah, and there's another there. David says it's going 2, 4, 1, 3. So, and Alan says, Stephanie, you were fantastic, and I 100% concur. Is there anything else you wanted to share with us before we finish, Stephanie, in terms of just anything really?
No, thank you so much for your time today, guys, and I hope that you really enjoyed the whiskey. If you have any other questions and you use Instagram at all, you can find me at Cocktail Shen, SHEN. So if there's any questions you think of afterwards, or you just if you want to chat more about whiskey, then you can always ask me any questions. But yeah, other than that, please enjoy the rest of your evening, enjoy the liquid, and thank you so much for having me.
No, that's marvelous, and that's a good plug on the Instagram Cocktail channel. I'll follow you, definitely. So yeah, hopefully better more content than what I put up anyway.
Oh gosh. Yeah. I don't. Has anybody really hacked Instagram though? I don't know. I mean, like, I don't feel like I'm cool enough for Instagram, but I still try. I
put up a lot of stuff and like drinks related, and I think it's gonna get like 16 likes, and then I put up some picture of the dog and it gets like 150 likes.
Well, like that's the key to the internet.
Just have the dog
you know what you need to do? You just need to like have the picture of the dog beside a bottle of whiskey, and then there you go. That's it. Yeah. That's like the internet explodes. Everyone commenting.
I had one of my best ever Snap or Instagram stories was we launched craft beers delivered, a craft beer website last year when the bar closed, to try and keep some of us in work. And we were unpacking boxes, and there was whiplash of a can beer called Roll Over, and I had the dog was there with me, and I got him to sit and roll over, and then as I said roll over, I introduced the can to the shot, and I was like dead proud of that one.
That's amazing. It deserves to be. I mean, I don't know the rest of your Instagram content, but like that is top tier. That's like a marketer's dream. You know what I mean?
Well, what did you say? What was your one again?
Cocktail Shen, Shen. So super easy to find.
We'll all check that out. And we have a few more comments coming in there before we finish. The Vitali says Keeper's Coin is the best. Really like Copper Alley 2, then the Murder Lane. And it says really enjoyed the Keeper's Coin. Thanks, Stephanie. Great tasting. Sekru says, who's been our best commenter tonight, says Copper Alley wins for me, then Keepers, then Murder. So I presume he means drink those two and then commit some murder. But
I did not advocate for murder. I just merely suggested a really good place to do it.
Yeah, you were just really into the recording.
It. Yeah. I don't advocate, but if you really wanted to, there's that alley, and I swear, like it's actually very aptly named. But yeah, I mean, like I would say honestly, like you know, I'm a very enthusiastic whiskey drinker, but I think the smoked stout for the price point is super delicious liquid. But that's why the Copper Alley for me is one of my favorite whiskeys hands down, because you've got that really beautiful like price point, and it is such a solid liquid. It is one of my like all-time favorite whiskeys, and that was before I even start working with Dublin Liberties. I just think it's that beautiful sweet spot. And then, you know, like who doesn't love a bit of PX and a bit of Tokai? So yeah, it's really interesting to see kind of like how everyone rates them. But it seems like Keeper's Coin / Copper Alley are probably the winners of today.
Yeah. No, definitely. Well, listen, so that was brilliant. So maybe we'll have you on again down the line. I don't think these virtual tastings are going away. They were the product of COVID, but I think they're here to stay, because we used to host monthly ones in the bar with different brands every month, and we'd about good 25 to 30 locals who come every single time. Yeah. And branching them out online like this has been just you know, with the people all over the world listening in as we speak, and they've been really great. So we'll keep them up. So either when you've got a few new whiskies out, or when we're finished other whiskies to taste, we'll come back around to you, and we'd love to have you back on. So.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for your time and your very lovely comments. I hope you all have a wonderful evening.
Marvelous. We'll see you. Good night, folks.